Jason, feel very welcome.
That's it. Thanks, Todd. Oh, it's great to be back. I can't remember the last time I presented at the Briz.net user group, but I always enjoy it, and it's really nice to be back here tonight, especially talking about one of my favorite talks, which is rapid solution development with ASP.NET Core Blazor WebAssembly, from new project to production in 45 minutes. So hi, I'm Jason Taylor. I'm an SSW solution architect and consultant, and I help clients develop, test, and deploy custom solutions to the cloud. You can find me on Twitter at JasonTaylorDev or my blog, jasontaylor.dev. I did have a bit of a streak going there for a little while. I was doing one post every week for about 12 or 13 weeks, but I've dropped the ball now. So I think it's been about 4 weeks since my last post. So hopefully I'll put one out soon on rapid solution development. So, as I've mentioned, the goal of this presentation is to rapidly deliver a new solution to production in 45 minutes. But as any seasoned .NET developer knows, we can already do that, right? Right-click, publish. But that's not really what I have in mind. I don't want to take shortcuts. I want to build a system that has everything that we would expect. So it should be an enterprise application using the principles of clean architecture. It should include support for build and deploy automation. I want CI/CD out of the box, and I want it set up. I would like automated tests, including unit tests, integration tests, subcutaneous tests, UI tests, ready to go out of the box. I would like logging and monitoring and the tools to support that. And you might be thinking, well, I also want to support multiple environments. So out of the box, I would like a test and a production environment. And you might be thinking, why? Why would I want to do this? Well, this is things that we'll have to do anyway, and I'm doing it for my next client project. I want to build more Blazor apps. This is something that I really enjoy doing, but I don't want to focus on the infrastructure. I want to focus on delivering business value, building the features that my client really wants. So let's pretend tonight that this is my next client project, and we've got a planning meeting in 1 hour. And so I want to spend 45 minutes just getting that initial version 0 to production so that I have enough time left over for a coffee as well. So let's get started. So in this talk, I'll cover creating the new project and the associated repository. We'll have proper source control. We'll look at automated build. So we'll set up a continuous integration to build, test, publish the project. We'll set up automated deployment. So we'll set up continuous deployment to deploy the infrastructure and the project to the cloud. And once the project's in production, I'll discuss the next steps. Let's get started. So typically .NET developers will start a new project using the built-in templates, right? So the .NET SDK includes a lot of great templates. Blazor WebAssembly has one. We can choose to use that template hosted on ASP.NET Core. We can also build web apps with Blazor Server. But there's going to be a lot of work for us to do if we take that approach. For example, for clean architecture, we would need to add projects for domain, application, and infrastructure to start to introduce those layers that we like to see in our enterprise apps. We'll need to set up data access, authentication, authorization, and other type concerns. We'll need to set up cross-cutting concerns such as logging and validation. And this is all going to take too long if we have to do this. Maybe we've got an existing project, the last project that we built. I have one. Maybe we have that we can use, but that's still going to take longer than 45 minutes to get up and running, right? And we're just talking about the new project here. We're not even talking about our build and our deploy and our hosting. So if we can't start from scratch, what will we do? Well, we might try and find another template, another more fully featured template that suits our needs. That's going to be a little bit hard. There's not too many of those around. Or we might try to build one ourselves. If we have this kind of experience, if we built this kind of project before, we can take what we learned from our last project and build it into a template ready to use next time. So that's exactly what I did. I built the Rapid Blazor .NET project template, which can be used in .NET CLI or Visual Studio 2022. And this template has been designed for building Blazor WebAssembly apps hosted on ASP.NET Core 7, and it follows the principles of clean architecture. We're using EF Core 7 for data access. It has built-in actions for our CI and CD, and it also has built-in bicep templates for infrastructure as code, so we can automatically provision and update our resources on the cloud. And of course, it's freely available and open source. So I'll demonstrate that tonight, and I'll share some resources where you can find it. All right, so we'll kick off our first demo, creating the new project and the Git repository. We'll jump over to Windows Terminal and just check so I'm going to use the GitHub CLI, and I can check my auth status to make sure I'm still authenticated. I'm good to go. So let me grab my cheat sheet. So I've got a cheat sheet over here, just in case you're wondering. This keeps me on track. Make sure that I don't miss any of the important points that I'd like to make. So we're going to go GitHub repo create. And this is really cool. This just gives us some interactive prompts that we can use now to create our repository locally. And on GitHub. So I'll create a new repository from scratch. We'll call it Rapid Blazor 21. 21 because it took me that many tries to get this right. Description, we'll leave blank. Visibility, we'll make it public. Would you like to add a README? No. Git ignore? No. License? No. Most of that stuff's in the template anyway. So it says we're going to create the repository. It's going to be public. Continue. Yep. And then my favorite thing is, do you want to clone it locally? And I just press enter because that's the default. And yes. And so if I do dir now, there's my new Rapid Blazor project ready to go. And so, of course, I can jump onto GitHub and see it there. Let's bring it up. Edge. Here we go. So if I go to GitHub, look at the repositories. There it is, Rapid Blazor 21, ready to go. Of course, it's empty, but it's a good start. So let's continue. All right, so I deployed a new version of the template earlier today. So let me just check to see if that's available. It should be. There's plenty of time. So 7.03, so that's good. So we'll go ahead and install the latest version. So to install the Rapid Blazor project template, I just type .NET new install. Notice in .NET 6 to .NET 7, they dropped the double dash. You can just type install now. JSON Taylor dev.rapidblazor. So that'll install the project template. You can see 7.02 is installed, so that's getting uninstalled, and it's upgrading to 7.03, which had some minor fixes in it. So now that that's in place, and I'm in the Rapid Blazor 21 directory, I can go, we'll just clear that screen. We'll go .NET new Rapid Blazor SLN. Now I can also do this from Visual Studio 2022 if I want to, but I like to get started from the command line. So that's going to create the project, and I want to make sure now that everything's working on my system before we dive in and look at the source code. So I'm going to do a quick restore, make sure all of the packages can be restored. Of course, I should have checked which version of .NET I was running and all that sort of thing, but I know I'm running 7, so on the latest version. Let's do a quick build, make sure that's working. I've got a warning there, and I've also got a to-do note to remove that warning before I present, but obviously I didn't get that one done, so next time. It's looking good. NSWAG's saying Net 6, but that's just because of the configuration it's using. It's all on Net 7. Okay, so that looks good. Why don't we jump in and have a look at the code and structure that we're getting out of the box. So if I fire this up in Visual Studio 2022, I'm going to put this over here because it's not working. All right. So zooming in. So this is the project, and we have inside of source 6 projects. So it's quite a lot, but it's the way that when you build a Blazor application hosted on ASP.NET Core, a Blazor WebAssembly application hosted on ASP.NET Core, it's the structure. So what we have here is the client app, and that's Blazor WebAssembly, that's your front end. We have the server, that's ASP.NET Core 7, that's the web API, and we have this shared folder. You can think of this as a contracts folder. It includes the common types that will be used to communicate between the client and server. So when I built this template, I wanted Blazor WebAssembly developers, the ones that had been building on ASP.NET Core, to know how this worked. And so I've kept that structure for the time being, but I am looking for feedback on that structure. If you think it can be done a little bit differently, then maybe we can kind of diverge from the out-of-the-box approach and find something even nicer. Other than those projects, we have the typical application layer, domain layer, and infrastructure layer. So domain's got our domain logic and types, application logic and types, and infrastructure has our cross-cutting concerns such as data access and authorization, that sort of thing. Now we also have some test projects. So inside of application, integration tests, mostly subcutaneous tests. So they're set up to run against the web application factory, and they target the code within the application layer and lower. So it's really targeting the application logic in our system. But those tests wire up real live databases, real live services, being as close to the production scenario as possible. The reason that we target those tests at that layer is because we try to keep the logic out of the front end. So there's not much logic in our front end, not much logic in our API. It's all in that application layer and the domain layer. We've got some basic unit tests in our application unit test project. We've got some unit tests in our domain project. And then we've got some very nice acceptance tests for our web UI. And they've been written using SpecFlow and Playwright. So they're quite fun to look at. But we only have a limited amount of time, so I'm not going to spend too much time looking at the structure, but essentially it's a Blazor WebAssembly app hosted on ASP.NET Core, following the principles of clean architecture, and this is well suited to enterprise application development. And this is what I like to consider the simplest approach to enterprise application development. All right, zooming out. The last thing that I like to do before I commit these changes back to GitHub is just to make sure that all of those tests are running. So we'll just get them up and running from the command line. Now, because I'm using Playwright, sometimes that needs to be installed first. It doesn't in my case because I already installed it, but I'll just show you how you can do that. So if I jump into the test directory, what was it, acceptance tests, into bin, net something, debug, net 7. In here, we've got a Playwright PS1 script, and if we run install, then it will go and install Playwright on your system, download all of the browser automation tools that it needs, and you'll be able to run those tests. But it does take a little while, so I'm not going to run it here. So I'll just drop over here, and what I'll do is I'll start the application running, and we might even take a quick look at the application running. So if I jump into Rapid Blazor 21, into source, web UI, and then the server. So when we start an ASP.NET Core, a Blazor WebAssembly app hosted on ASP.NET Core, we just start the API. That's our development experience. So we start server, and it'll start the front end and the back end for us. And of course, we just do that using .NET Run. Give it a moment. All right, so now that that's running, I can run all of my tests, and I can do that from the solution level, and I can just write .NET test. No, I want to do no build because it'll fail to build, right? Because we've got the server running. So we go no build. There we go. So that'll run all of the tests in all of the test projects and just make sure that everything seems to be working on our machine. It's pretty good way to get started. So what do we have? We have a structure for building this application that's already largely defined. And it's defined, of course, with the way I like to do things. That's why this is a specialized approach. This is the way that I like to do things. And I would encourage you to look at this approach. And if it's the way you like to do things, that's great. If not, think about how can I take the same steps as what Jason has done and get a new application to production in 45 minutes within your own stack. All right, so that's all looking good. Let's go ahead and commit all this to GitHub. So go git add, git commit, no. We go, ta-da, new project. Is everyone using git emoji? I use git emoji for everything now. Git push. Yeah, it's really cool. Let me show you. So you just, I don't know, like the site, git emoji. It's probably something really easy. No, don't tell me. I'm just going to Google it every single time for the rest of my life. That's not it. That's the wrong one. Now I've learnt it. Oh well. Oh no. It's because I went to Bing, git-mog. There we go. Okay, so I just come here, and if I'm like creating a new project or something, I just type, this is for a new feature, and project is ta-da. And like if you're doing some infrastructure stuff, you've got bricks. If you're doing, say, where was it? Add or update a CI build system, you've got a construction worker. So it's really cool. And then what happens is then you get a git commit history that looks like this. This is very pretty. Okay, so we pushed all of those changes through, and I think that's it. We've seen the repo. We didn't see it running though. We should have a quick look at that. Go right to the top here. I don't know what port it's running on. I'll have to check. Oh, that will take too long. Let's just run it again. 7124 probably. Yep. Okay. So this is what it looks like out of the box. Very vanilla at the moment. One of the things in the next steps that I would like to do is to update the UI. When you start this program from scratch, it actually seeds the database automatically, puts in some sample data, puts in some sample users. So even though the database didn't exist, I can go ahead and log in. So it fires up the application for me. It's got some standard kind of concepts here from the template, home, counter, fetch data. Fetch data is an example of pulling back some data from that backend API. But then we've got some additional stuff in here. So we've got the prerequisite to-do list. Of course, I always take it a step further, and you can have multiple lists, multiple to-do items. Okay, so it's a lot better. You can even kind of manage different properties of the list and stuff like that. I have a sample kind of users management where you can come in and just assign users to roles, essentially. And then inside of roles, I've got a little bit of application so that you can create roles on the fly. And then one of my nice favorite things is my access control. So we can assign specific permissions to roles. And that means we have a very flexible approach to authorization. So, you know, when the organization restructures, it's okay for us to rename roles. We're not doing authorization checks via roles in our application. So I'd like to bring in a lot more features like this into the template, but it still has to be a general approach, things that I would expect to use in most of the applications that I build. So there we go. Jump over to the slides, and one step here. So what did we look at? We looked at creating the new project, the repository using the GitHub CLI. Then we created the new project using the rapid Blazor .NET project template. And I showed you how to install that using .NET New. We reviewed the project structure and features briefly. We ran restore, build, and test to ensure normal behavior. We launched the site to see it in action, and we committed our changes to the Git repository. So now we can look at automated build. So we'll set up the automated build pipeline. So for this project, CI pipeline will be powered using GitHub Actions. And the Rapid Blazor template includes built-in workflows that automate the build steps. So the workflow is responsible for building the project, running the automated tests, and if the build and test steps succeed, publishing and packaging the project. Let's dive in. So we'll look at reviewing the build workflow and ensuring that it's operating correctly. Because as you might have guessed, if there's already a GitHub workflow in place, it's actually already running. When we committed those first changes to main, it kicked off. So we'll have a look at that and see how it's going. Okay, so we want to look at Rapid Blazor 21, which is our new project. And if we jump into actions, and I'll just zoom this in a bit, it says that it failed, which is disappointing. It's not really what I was looking for. No, it's not too bad. What actually, to be honest, what's confusing me more is there's 2 workflow runs. Maybe if I refresh it, it will go away. No, okay. Because there's 1 commit and 2 runs, right? That doesn't seem right. Same commit. Anyway, that's okay. I'm going to ignore that. So it was successful to a point. It actually completed the build successfully, and it did some linting on the bicep templates, which was great. So the build was successful, where it was responsible for checking out the source code, installing .NET, restoring the website, building the website, testing the website, publishing, packaging, and uploading the website, which is now ready to deploy. Where it failed was when it tried to deploy to test. And the reason that it failed is because it couldn't authenticate with Azure. And that's something that we're going to set up when we look at automated deploy. So that's a success, but I am confused as to why the workflow kicked off twice, because I haven't seen that before. But that's okay. It doesn't seem to. Same commit, yeah. Yeah, look at that. That's okay. 6 minutes ago, 3 minutes and 25 seconds. It seems like the same work. Oh no, look, 3 minutes and 25, 3 minutes and 5. That's interesting. All right, but we're not going to dwell on that. If that's the only thing that goes wrong, I'll be very happy. Okay, so we want to look at the workflow, and we can find those in the template. What I'll do is I'll open this. It's always nice to look at the workflows in Visual Studio Code and the bicep templates and that sort of stuff in Visual Studio Code. So we'll open that up as well. We'll need to zoom in there. Okay, so our GitHub workflows are in the GitHub folder, and our main workflow is called Workflow. This is a pretty boring name, but I gave it a better name here. So it's build and deploy. And so this workflow is triggered when there's any change pushed to main, okay? And it can also be triggered manually if we would like to. And this workflow essentially orchestrates all of the other workflows. So it can build the solution, it can check our bicep files, it can deploy to test, deploy to production. It just depends on what's happening. So we'd like to look at our build workflow. And of course, note, these come out of the box in the template, but they're designed to be customized. So it gets you up and running, but then you can change it to suit your requirements. So let's have a look at our build workflow. I'll make this one a little bit smaller. So this one is triggered by the main workflow, and it's going to run on Ubuntu, and it has a dependency on SQL Server. So when we run the build workflow, it's going to run all of the tests except the acceptance tests, because I've been too lazy to put them into the workflow yet, but I can show you how to do that if you need to. But it will run the integration tests, and they're going to run against a live SQL Server as part of the pipeline. So we use SQL Server, we spin up a SQL Server container, so that will be available. And later on down here, we also set an environment variable for the connection string to that SQL Server instance. And of course, the application will create a database and use Entity Framework call migrations to upgrade it and then seed some data and run some tests. So the steps, other than that, is to check out the code as we saw to install .NET. It's going to install the version that we have specified in global.json, which is version 7. It's going to build the website using .NET CLI commands. So .NET build, no restore, configuration release, test the website, pretty much runs all of the tests, as I said, but we are excluding those acceptance tests. So you can see there's a filter there, basically says where the name is not like acceptance tests. We're going to publish the website. So release, output to the publish folder, zip it up and upload it so that it's ready for the deployment pipeline later on. Fairly straightforward. Okay, so we had that run successfully, but it failed because it couldn't connect to Azure. Now I'm going to set that stuff up now, even though it's part of the automated deploy, so that we don't have to wait for the workflow to finish later on. I don't like to do things by hand. I don't want to jump on the Azure portal or to navigate around GitHub and do these things by hand because I can't get it done in 45 minutes. So I created some scripts to help us with this sort of thing. So if I jump into if I jump back a couple of directories, that's not going to cut it. Try again. And jump into one more. Okay, jump into my deploy folder. I've got some bicep templates and 2 scripts. So setup.ps1 is the one that I'll run now and the one that we'll look at later. So setup.ps1 is going to be responsible for configuring GitHub, my repository, and it's going to be responsible for configuring Azure. So in GitHub, it's going to set up the necessary environments and the secrets so that it can connect to Azure. And in Azure, we're going to set up some workload identities and some resource groups so that everything's ready to go for the deployment pipeline. So I need to specify my GitHub organization name, and that is Jason Taylor Dev in this case. That's my username on GitHub. I need to specify the repository name. In this case, it's Rapid Blazor 21. And I need to specify the Azure location where I'd like my resources. And I will say Australia East. So now it will do all of that work for me. Of course, I could do this using the Azure portal, but I can't do it quickly using the Azure portal. The only thing it's going to ask me for is passwords for SQL Server. So I have to type them in myself because it's a little bit better than just putting those secrets into source control, right, into the script and then committing it to Git. And I'll use super strong passwords just like Brendan last month. So I'll be using password 123 with an exclamation mark. Give it a second. So what did we do? We created the workload identity and the resource group for test and production. And then we created some GitHub environments and some GitHub secrets. And I'll show all of that to you in the next section. Now I'll put in my password 123 exclamation mark. That's for test. And this one is password 123 exclamation mark too, because it's easier to remember if all of our passwords are the same. But don't do that. Okay, so that should see our pipeline continue normally. And what I'll do here is just go to this latest one, and I will just rerun the failed jobs. Okay, and come back to the slides. One sec. There we go. So in that demonstration, we reviewed the main workflow, which was responsible for orchestrating the other workflows. We also reviewed the build workflow, which was responsible for building, testing, and packaging the published application. We saw the workflow, the build workflow at least, completed successfully without further configuration required. And to save time, we ran the setup.ps1 script, which has configured our GitHub repository and our Azure environment to allow the deployment workflow to run without error. So now let's look at the automated deployment. So for the automated deployment, we're going to have continuous deployment also using GitHub Actions, of course. The Rapid Blazor template includes a built-in deployment workflow, and the deployment workflow will run after the build workflow succeeds, and it's responsible for validating the bicep templates, provisioning Azure infrastructure, and deploying the packaged website. So once the deployment workflow successfully completes, the new site will be live. And it's probably worthwhile taking a step back and thinking, why am I doing all of this? Why am I using bicep templates? Why am I using PowerShell? Why am I using the GitHub CLI? It's because if we take the time to learn these tools, then they can make us very productive and very powerful. If we don't, then we can't accomplish file new project to production in 45 minutes, right? It will take too long. For a great team, it might take a few days. But for a bad team, this stuff can take 3 weeks. And so I wanted to create an example for me to use for my next client project, but also to showcase that if you look at your stack and think about how you're doing things, how you might be able to change your approach. And obviously, it doesn't work if you jump from stack to stack to stack. But if you have a specialization that you know and love and you want to stick with it, that's when you can dive a little bit deeper and start to do some of these things. All right, so let's demo the automated deploy. So in this final demo, we're going to review the deploy workflow, ensure that it's operating correctly, and that the test and production sites are live and accessible. Okay. Let's have a look at that setup script first. So that's in this deploy folder, setup.ps1. I'll get rid of that. Okay. So you saw me input some parameters. In actual fact, the script takes 4 parameters. So it has the GitHub organization name, which I inputted as Jason Taylor Dev, the repository name, Rapid Blazor 21, the Azure location, Australia East, and also the project name. That one's not mandatory and it defaults to the GitHub repository name. When we use the .NET project template, something really cool happened as well. Anything, because the template's called Rapid Blazor, anything in the template that has the words Rapid Blazor is replaced by .NET New. So throughout our template, in certain places, we'll see Rapid Blazor 21, like the name of our solution will be Rapid Blazor 21. Some of the defaults in the Bicep templates will be Rapid Blazor 21. So it really cuts down on the work that we have to do. And of course, you get namespaces and all that sort of thing. I've got some variables there just to define the name of my test environment, production environment, and I have a bunch of functions, but I don't want to look at those just yet. Let's have a look at the basic structure. So this is the Azure initialization. First thing it does is create the workload identity. So what is the workload identity? Well, it's an Azure AD application that represents Rapid Blazor 21 test in this case. And so when we set up the workload identity, we create that Azure AD app registration, but we also create some federated credentials for that app registration, 2 federated credentials. And what that allows our application, what that allows GitHub Actions to do is to authenticate against Azure so that it can then deploy changes. The reason that it needs 2 federated credentials is it has one specific set of credentials when it's working against an environment and another set of credentials when it's not working against an environment. So when it's working against an environment, it might be deploying new changes. When it's not working against an environment, it might just be validating Bicep templates, things like that. So then once the workload identity for test has been created, we go ahead and create the resource group for the test application. So it'll be called Rapid Blazor 21 test. And we also allow the Azure AD application registration we created contributor access to that resource group. So everything is set up and ready to go for test. We then repeat those steps for the production environment, and then we do our GitHub initialization. So GitHub initialization is quite simple. We just create 2 environments in GitHub, one for test, one for production, and then we create about 5 or 6 secrets in GitHub, most of which are responsible for authenticating with Azure. So let's have a quick look at these functions. So creating the workload identity, it uses the Azure CLI, and it creates a new Azure AD app registration using the AZ AD app create command. It then creates some credentials as JSON objects. That was the best way I could think to do it in PowerShell. And then it calls Azure AD app federated credential create and specifies the ID of that application that we just created. So it associates those credentials. So this one is the environment specific one. So you can see it's referencing this specific GitHub organization name, Jason Taylor Dev, this repository name, Rapid Blazor 21, this environment name, perhaps test. Okay, and then it creates a second set of credentials, which is not environment specific. So once those credentials have been created, we go ahead and create the resource group. So we pass in the environment name, the app ID that we just created. We create a new resource group using the Azure CLI and the AZ group create command. Then we create a service principal for the app that we created. And finally, we assign the role of contributor to that resource group. So that's it. We repeat that for test and production. And finally, we create our environments in GitHub. Now, GitHub CLI is pretty cool, but it doesn't support creating environments from the command line last time I checked. So I actually have to use the GitHub API for that. But the cool thing is we can get the token from the GitHub CLI. So if we're authenticated with the GitHub CLI, we grab that token and we can make an authenticated request to the GitHub API. Finally, so we create 2 environments there, test and production. Finally, we set our secrets that'll be necessary for our application. So we set an Azure client ID for test and production. Those are the 2 app registrations we created. We specify the tenant ID and the subscription ID. You notice there's not really any secrets here, except further down with the database passwords. In the past, we did have to specify a client secret for GitHub Actions to authenticate against Azure. We don't have to do that anymore, so it's a little bit more secure as a result. And then there's the secrets for the database, which I passed in interactively. And that's pretty much it. So that's the setup. So that's the stuff that I would have to do manually if I didn't have a nice little PowerShell script to do it automatically for me. All right, so we're going to have a look now at let's have a look at the deploy workflow. So the deploy workflow is triggered, of course, by the main workflow, and it's only triggered when the build workflow completes successfully. So it has a number of inputs, such as environment type, resource group name, the SQL Server administrator login. It expects a number of secrets, such as the Azure client ID, the tenant ID, the description ID. It needs specific permissions, and essentially it will run a number of jobs. So it has a validate job, which is going to validate my bicep templates before it tries to deploy them. It has a deploy job, which is dependent on the validate job, which is actually going to deploy the infrastructure. So this is where it will actually use, this is where it will actually use that, well, it's using ARM deploy in this case, not Azure CLI. I was going to say Azure CLI. So it's using ARM deploy to deploy that main.bicep template that we haven't looked at yet. So it's going to provision all of the infrastructure first, and then it will go ahead and deploy the website. So it'll download that artifact we created in the build pipeline and deploy it using Azure Web Apps Deploy. So this workflow is reusable. It can be used for the test and the production environment or any other environments you create. It just depends what you pass in as the inputs. Okay, so let's have a look at the infrastructure. So infrastructure has been defined using bicep templates, which is the simplest way I can do it. Otherwise, I'd have to go and create it by hand, or which would not be very good. I could use ARM templates, I guess, or something else. But I chose to use bicep. This one's pretty straightforward, quite simple. So you can see we start with the location where we'd like our Azure resources to be deployed, environment type. Resource name suffix is something that you could take out. It's a little bit of string randomization so that we ensure that we get unique resource names. The reason that you can take that out is because once you move from the template stage, you can check to see if the resource names are available. So it'll just produce nicer resource names if you take that out. So we've got the SQL Server administrator login, the password, a whole bunch of variables which just define the names for the resources. I tried to follow Azure's naming conventions for resources so that it's kind of hopefully aligned with what most people is doing. So our key vault is prefixed with KV. So it'll be KV-RapidBlazor21-test or prod, depending on which particular one it is. So all the resource names are defined there. We've got an environment configuration map, different configuration for test, different configuration for production, allows us to specify that a little bit easier. And then we go ahead and create all of our resources. So we create a key vault. We put a connection string in key vault. We create our app service plan. We create our app service. We create our app settings. I'm doing something a little bit special here. Later on, I have to create a certificate for the app service, and that needs a thumbprint. The way that I'm deploying that certificate, I'm putting that thumbprint into the configuration. So the special thing that I'm doing here is when the bicep template applies these configuration settings, it's not removing existing settings. So it's merging the settings together. So my certificate thumbprint doesn't get wiped out. And that's all defined within app settings.bicep. So that's a reusable bicep template that you can have a look at. But essentially, it's setting the application insights instrumentation key, the connection string, and the key vault name. Let's see, key vault access policy, so the right resources can get access to the right keys and secrets and certificates. Log analytics workspace, my storage for application insights, app insights, SQL Server, firewall rule, database, and outputting a bunch of the results from there. So there's quite a lot to cover there. Obviously, I can't cover everything in 45 minutes, and it's not about trying to teach you Blazor or Bicep or PowerShell or how to create a .NET template. It's about showing you what's possible. And so if you've seen something tonight that you want to learn more about, I've got resources. So just come and talk to me, and I can share the right resources with you depending on what level you're at. All right, so that's our infrastructure as code. Let's see, did the deployment run? That's the big question. It's still going, but it's going well. It's finished test. I can't find the little zoom thing. There it is. There we go. So it's finished test. So this is where it deployed the infrastructure. It deployed the infrastructure for the first time in 3 minutes and 55 seconds. It deployed the website in 1 minute and 25 seconds. Did the prod validation, validating those templates, did the deployment. And now, yeah, it's finished. Okay, so that's good. So our site is almost live, not quite. Identity Server requires a little bit of additional configuration to get it up and running, and I haven't managed to get that to work in the Bicep template yet. That's something I'm working on. I need to play with deployment scripts a little bit more. But I did create a PowerShell script to do that for me, and it's a bit problematic. So we'll give it a shot and see if it works. It's called Ensure Certificate, okay? And what it's going to do is it's going to generate a new SSL certificate in Key Vault for me. It's going to grab the thumbprint, and then it's going to go over to the app service. It's going to apply that thumbprint to the configuration and import that certificate. So these are all steps we can do by hand, but I don't want to do it by hand for test and prod and just to save time. So let's give it a try. It's going to ask for a whole bunch of inputs. So we'll just go to the portal, and I just need to jump in there because the only thing that I don't know is the name of that app service, and I don't really want to type it out by hand anyway. So we'll go to Rapid Blazor 21 test. We'll just set it up for test environment tonight. So it needs the resource group name, so I can copy and paste that from there like any good developer. There we go. And then it wants the app service name. So that's this one. There we go. And then it wants the Key Vault name. That's this one. And if we're really lucky, it's going to work. If not, you can see me do it by hand. There's an error. That's okay. I know what that error is for. So I can fix that one. Let's just stop it. Okay. So I just need to give myself access to my Key Vault. I will move this over to role-based at some point, but I haven't gotten time to do that yet. So I'm just going to give myself lots of access, which will be blown away next time I deploy anyway. Okay, let's try that again. Fingers crossed. I think I can, yes. Go down that one and Key Vault. Okay, fingers crossed. Should work. There we go. Couldn't find the certificate. Generating the sign-in certificate. So it's generating the new certificate in Key Vault. Takes a little while, but not too long. All right, now it's updating the app service configuration. I'll show you what it does. And it's importing the certificate into the app service. This should probably show a warning, but at the same time, I think it'll actually work. So, okay, let's have a look. So in Key Vault, we now have a new certificate, and this is used by Identity Server. This is the Identity Server token sign-in certificate, okay? And so we've generated that automatically. If we go to our app service, okay, and in here, under configuration, we have new configuration that was added by the script, and it is the website load certificates, and it's got the thumbprint for the certificate that was just created. And then over here in certificates preview, we've imported that certificate, and it's now ready to be used with the site. Okay, so all of this stuff that we don't have to do anymore. So if I click on this and everything's working, then the site should now be loaded in Azure, ready to go. And of course, I'd run that ensure certificate for production as well, so that we can make sure that production's ready to go. Creating databases and doing all sorts of wonderful things. Actually, that's one thing that I do need to improve on the template, is it's creating the database at runtime when the application starts up. So we need to move that to the deployment pipeline. So I'll get to that too. That is on a to-do list somewhere, but I don't know which list anymore. I've got too many. So that's looking good. There we go. We're ready to log in. We can do that admin at localhost. I think you know the password. Password 123 exclamation mark. Okay, good to go. Now let me just check my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. We had kind of a quick look at the Azure resources. I don't want to go through them all in detail because you kind of saw them a little bit in the template, but just to show you, We've got application insights up and running that's configured and connected to our app service, so we can debug issues and problems within there. We've got our app service. That's that little bit of randomization I told you about. That just makes sure that the domain is unique, so we can literally go file new project to production in 45 minutes without worrying about that sort of thing. We can change it later. We've got Key Vault, we've got Log Analytics Workspace, our app service plan, our SQL server, and our SQL database. See, there's that same randomization string used there again. So you can just use the Azure CLI to check if the names that you'd like to use are available, and then go in and customize the template before you do your first deploy, so you don't have to have that sort of thing. So that's our Rapid Blazor 21 test, and then there's also Rapid Blazor 21 production with all of the same resources, just without the certificate being configured. So good to go. All right. There we go. So in that demonstration, we reviewed the setup script, which was responsible for configuring our GitHub repository and also our Azure environment. We reviewed the deployment workflow, which was responsible for deploying the infrastructure and the project itself to Azure. We reviewed the Bicep templates, which was used by the deployment workflow to provision our Azure resources, and will be used by the deployment workflow to keep our Azure resources configured as we've defined within those templates forevermore. So if someone goes into Azure Portal and changes things, it'll get reverted back. We saw that the workflow completed successfully, and we examined the Azure resources. We configured the identity server token sign-in certificates. I've made that a little bit easier now using the PowerShell script, but as mentioned, I would like to move that into the Bicep template. And finally, we launched the site and saw that it ran successfully. Okay, so before we wrap up, I just wanted to share some next steps with you. So I'd like to improve the automation. I've already mentioned that I would like the provisioning of the certificates to happen automatically, and anything else I can do to minimize the requirements of that early stages setup script, such as maybe moving the resource group creation into the Bicep template, might be good. So I'm definitely looking for any feedback that you have. I'd like to document the entire process. So with some of my projects, I haven't been big on documentation. I'll answer lots of questions, but for this one, I really want to document it out and make sure that people can understand how to use it, and also understand why I might have chosen to do something one way as opposed to another way, because some of the decisions that I make might not be the decisions you would make for the same solution. I'd like to build in more sample features. I'd like to have an example of a simple report. I'd like to have a sample of a data grid, those sorts of things. I want to improve the UI and UX. I'm going to look at Tailwind. I haven't had a chance to look at Tailwind yet, but I see a lot of great resources out there and a lot of good books on it, so I think there's good opportunity there. And I want to hear from you. It's an open source project. So if you have some suggestions that could make this simpler or to improve it in some way, I would really like to incorporate those suggestions into this project. That's why it's open source. I hope that the people in the Blazor community will love it and use it. And for people who are not using the Blazor stack, that they will hopefully take some inspiration from it and apply these learnings to their own stack. So in this presentation, I demonstrated a specialized approach to rapidly deliver a new app to production in 45 minutes. We use the .NET project template. I built the Rapid Blazor template specifically for those purposes, because we couldn't do everything that we wanted to do if we had to go file a new project and use an out-of-the-box template. We used built-in workflows with GitHub Actions. They came out of the box with a template to establish our basic CI/CD pipeline. We used our built-in Bicep templates to build our infrastructure, because I couldn't have done that by hand in less than 45 minutes. So with this setup, anyone from the team can now deploy those changes to production, and the same process will be used each time. We can evolve that process to suit our needs as our needs change over time. And that's a really good position to be in, right? Now the team will be able to focus on delivering business value. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed my talk. I hope you found some inspiration. As promised, if you do want some learning resources on any of the things that I've showed you tonight, I'm happy to share them. I won't include a long list of resources at the end because there's too much. And I just want to say thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Todd.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
few really great things I didn't know about from that
Oh,
talk.
cool.
So thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks again for preparing and coming along and speaking with us.
No problem.
We do have a gift. The user group is sponsored by JetBrains, and so we have a 100% discount code to say thank you to Jason, so he can try any IDE of his choice for the next 12 months for free.
Awesome.
So thanks again, mate. Put your hands together again for Jace.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
We'll come back in 5 minutes. Just have a toilet break, grab some more pizza, grab another drink, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. And JK's talking about .NET EF Core 7.
Yeah, of course.
Questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Please.
I was just wondering, when you said you weren't able to get the certificate set up in the automation.
The deployment, yeah. So,
was there some specific challenges around that, or just
two things. Yes. So I wasn't able. So the question was, statement was, you mentioned that I said I wasn't able to get the deployment of the certificate set up in Bicep. And your question was there some challenges, or did I run out of time? There were two challenges, and there was me running out of time also. So I built the script, but I haven't played with deployment scripts before, so I haven't had a chance to kind of try it out. I've only done the very basics, and I just couldn't see a very straightforward way to get it done in time, so I didn't tackle it. So if you do know how to do that, I would love to talk to you about it.
Plenty of time for questions, so
yeah.
I did look at your GitHub on my phone, and
cool.
See you got the Blazor 21 set up like 10 minutes ago or whatever.
Yes.
That one's probably going to be deleted, right?
Yeah, I'm going to delete it.
But the other one below it.
Yes. So this little QR code, if you want to, will just take you to. Let me bring it over here. It will take you to Rapid Blazor, which is right here. So this one will stick around for a while. Now, I do have a bit of a problem. So I have the clean architecture template, and a lot of the things that are in here, I'm going to bring across to the clean architecture template because it's got a little bit of a pipeline, but it doesn't have infrastructure as code and all that sort of thing. So I'm trying to decide next year, do I bring multiple front ends to the clean architecture template? Do I have Angular, React, and Blazor? And if I do that, then everything from Rapid Blazor is going to come across to there, and Rapid Blazor will probably be archived because everything in clean architecture template will be there ready to use. But I haven't made a decision on that just yet. So Rapid Blazor will be around for a long time. And of course, if you're doing Angular, then you can check out the clean architecture template as well. Oh, since we're talking about templates, this is my favorite one. It's not very popular, but I built this little Rapid console template, which I really love. If you want to create a new console application, I had the opportunity to use this on a client. You can just go .NET new, .NET new Rapid console, and it'll spin up a new console application with support for commands, dependency injection, logging, and a whole lot more out of the box. It's pretty cool. Anyway, that's the side note. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, I was. Yes, SQL Server. Yeah. No, that's good. So in local development, it was using SQL Server. You could switch it over to SQLite or Postgres or something else, but it's not supported as part of the template. And then in the deployment to Azure, it was using SQL Azure. And all of that was provisioned automatically, whether it was local dev or in Azure. Cool. Yes?
Is there any particular reason you use GitHub rather than Azure DevOps?
I don't. Is there any particular reason I used GitHub other than Azure DevOps? I know and love Azure DevOps, but GitHub's doing a lot of cool stuff, and I haven't had the chance to play with some of the toys. So I've been using I've been using GitHub Actions, and then I thought I should play with the GitHub CLI, and I've also been using their new AI tool for a long time now, but I can't think of the name. Copilot, and it's just been sitting there in the background for like 6 months now, helping me. But then I forgot the name. So, yeah, I just want to learn more about GitHub, and I wanted more experience with GitHub Actions, and I think they have some exams now, so I'd like to kind of follow that up with the exams and see if there's any gaps in my knowledge as well. So yeah.
It's a good place for sharing as well.
It is, yeah. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.